Hello, YouTube. Did I just want to make a video making my first of many tier lists for the Torchlight Afterlife season. So, in previous seasons, the way I've done tier lists was to just, make a tier list where I take every single character and just go like, oh, this is S, this is A, this is B, and there was a lot of logic and thought behind my decision making. It never quite sat right with me as a content creator making those videos, just for one reason. It felt very like the videos weren't very informational. They didn't really tell you anything as like a new player.
Meow,
So
meow.
I decided going to this new season, I'm going to try out a new format where I'm going to be rating characters within archetypes. So what I mean by that is, generally when I think about archetypes in this game, I would say that like most builds can be split into three categories. You're either a melee attack build, a ranged attack build, a caster, a dot caster, or a minion build. And then I'm gonna try and rank characters within each of those archetypes. So like there's gonna be a best character for that specific archetype, because I think that's gonna be a lot more useful for like newer players, because you can kind of figure out for yourself if you're playing an RPG game. It's like, oh, I want to be this melee character. I want to be this ranged, the bow character. I want to be the spellcaster. I want to be the minion caster or the summoner or whatever. And based off that, you can just go watch the specific video and get a lot of good information from that video. But then to actually add a lot more value to the videos, instead of just focusing on like, oh, this character is this good, this character is that good, I want to spend a bit more time really going into detail on each character and talk about, just go a bit more in depth about the characters, talk about the character's hero trait a bit, how it interacts with like the skill archetype, as well as making some predictions on the market of like how I think it's going to be in terms of like cost to effectiveness in the new league, etc. So, with all of that being said, most importantly, the considerations for this tier list is I am going to go based off my own knowledge of the game. I am not all-knowing. I have not played every single character. I have played a ton of builds. I have an absurd amount of knowledge, but I do not know everything. And in cases where I feel like I don't know enough or I need more information, I will be asking only trusted friends. I will not be asking strangers online. I will not be researching on the Discord or whatever, because I do not trust those people. I will be going to people who I know play on the same level or higher of me on the game. I'm going to go to people that are doing SS20 day 3, day 4 of the league. I'm going to be going to people who are reaching deep space day 2. Okay? With all that being said, let's start with the tier list. So let's just go in order based off of my notes. Rayhan 1. So Rayhan 1 is it's a very interesting character. The way Rayhan 1 works essentially is he has a hero trait called... He has a hero trait which does like basically bursts. Attacks trigger burst once on hit. And the whole concept behind Rayhan 1, the whole way you play him, is you want to scale cooldown reduction as well as attack speed to get as many bursts per second as possible and have your like attack frequency match this burst rate. So generally the way that people are going to be playing him is they're going to be playing a skill that can just attack frequently and just constantly trigger burst. So what you'll commonly see from Rayhan players is they're either going to be playing Whirlwind or they're going to be playing Savage Charge. No, I'm going to be showing you Whirlwind because I think that is the more popular setup. And also Whirlwind is getting buffed next season, so, I expect most Rayhan players to play it. But it is notable to mention that you're not really scaling Whirlwind for your damage. All of your damage scaling that you're doing with Rayhan is coming from your burst, which is your hero trait. Now, this is a day 1 setup that I found from a Chinese Rayhan that did reach time mark 8. This is the gear he had, this is the gear setup he went. A big concept for what these Rayhan players are doing is they're going into True Flame and scaling Affliction effect to gain value from that True Flame. Because if you do fire damage, you know, if you're doing a bunch of fire damage, and you scale fire damage, you are going to be... I mean, it's essentially the same as every other like fire damage build that I've played in the past. I don't really know what much more to say about that. Just Ray and 1 players do tend to go for full fire convert, and then scaling fire damage. And they do first to fire conversion. But yeah, it's a very basic, generic setup that they do early on. So what the Ray players do, which is worth noting, is they play a two-handed weapon. Almost all of them, always early game, use this Arminius Guillotine. And a very powerful mod that you can really then go for is, other than just doing additional base damage to two-handed weapons, which doesn't have that much value early on compared to later on, but you can instead do is go for a ton of inflicted paralyze effect. Paralyze is actually a very, very powerful mod, and getting a lot of like additional effect for it early on is extremely powerful. But yeah, it's just a very, very standard generic day 1 build, nothing too special about it. If there's anything you were curious about, this is just all the gear that they're using. Now then, going up to SS20, this is how a Supreme Shot on 20 Rand build's gonna look like. So, going to SS20, we're still doing the same thing as before for Wind. This is just being used as an activation medium for our burst. We're still scaling all of our damage to burst. And a big way that we're going to be scaling our burst is going to be via cooldown reduction. So, once I get to the gear in a second, it's going to be very common to find they're going to have CDR on their gear. And in this Rand's case, you know, they have CDR and they have the Dream Mod CDR. The reason for this is just your burst has a 0.3 second base cooldown. Any cooldown reduction you do have on the character, it does reduce this cooldown. And this burst is just the entire concept of your hero. All that you're doing is just buffing up your burst and making it stronger. And very commonly for Rand players is they are going to be going for the strength stacking setup. So they do the full Magnus setup. And then they Vorax Magnus on. You can obviously just use the Magnus chest, but Voraxing it has a big benefit because, like in this guy's case, he has strength, percent strength, and dot damage taken, which that is very powerful. This is actually a very, very good Vorax item to have. Doing attribute stacking, just very, very generic strength stacking, nothing too special to it. With the only niche really being the fact that they're scaling CDR on top of, you know, the whole bunch of other things they're doing. And of course, they're still playing a true flame build. So they're still getting a night effect here and there where possible. And there's some very nice mods for a night effect, like, and for affliction effect. Like, you know, if you're playing Rift Slate, you can get 15% affliction effect. That's pretty decent. And there's also a orange mod, which I'm not sure if this player has one. It does not seem like they do. But there's also like an orange mod you can get, which makes it that if the enemy is ignited, they have minus all res, which is also pretty powerful. Just giving you some extra forms of penetration on the build. And yeah, pretty much just a very standard setup. So, what do I think about the character? Where is he going to be rating on his tier list? Well, he's a really interesting character. I think he's really cool. He's really bad. He's a really, really bad character. I think if you throw enough FP at him, like, he will work eventually if you just keep throwing money at it. But I think it's very common when you look at Rand 1's progression curves that they just kind of don't have that insane damage. You're playing like a very weird, funky build, you know. It's a unique concept, but it definitely doesn't live up to quite the same power level that a lot of other builds in the game have right now. And especially when you're comparing him to like melee attackers, which are like some of the strongest builds in the game right now, Rayhan 1 definitely just falls behind a lot. Then next up we're gonna have Rayhan 2. Rayhan 2 is an absurdly powerful hero. So for early on, so the big thing about Rayhan 2 and his niche, Rayhan 1 is about like proccing your burst constantly. The whole niche around Rayhan 2 is that you have the Seething Spirit. where this seething spirit is constantly like on your backpack, following you around and attacking enemies with like attack skills. You have two options. You have one where it's like the spirit is always there and you cannot attack anymore. And you have one where like you need to attack, but when you attack, the seething spirit appears and the seething spirit is just going to be like attacking as well, along with you attacking. And unlike Rayan 1, Rayan 2 is just absurdly powerful. He's a very, very strong hero. The Seething Spirit backpack that you have is very powerful. And he's a very common hero that people use when they try to push to deep space, like day 1, not day 1, but like day 2 of the league, for example. I remember like last league there were a few Rayan 2, or maybe not a few Rayan 2s, but I know of some Rayan 2s who like, pushed into deep space day 2 by like rushing Eternity plus Cicada Shell. And his hero trait also makes it that he's a very, very, very strong hero for doing like a life consume build. But obviously you're not going to be doing like a life sack or life consume build early into the league. If you do that later in the league though, it is going to be extremely powerful and give you a ton of damage. And this was the day 1 setup. Let me show you the day 2 setup that people are going to have on Rayan 2. So this setup is sticking to combo skills and just playing Spectral Slash the entire way through. But it is entirely valid to also do a life stacking setup. If you do want to do a life stacking setup on Rayan 2 though, a big thing that you need to invest into or be aware of is you need to get enough life consume to actually like max out or get close to maxing out your life consume items. Now, the reason life-consuming bolts are like really powerful in Rayan is because he does have a trait, which makes it that you don't need to like hit enemies anymore for your life regain to activate. So you can just like constantly heal yourself to full of life regain, and then consume all of your life out and constantly drop to like low life and gain a ton of damage from being a low life HP based build. But I'm sure there's tons of people that are like doing stuff like that if you want to look at that. The setup I'm showing you here is just doing a Spectral Slash, which is a lot easier to set up, a lot like less thinking, I think, for like especially for like a new player to set up. And the build's very powerful. This build did do SS20 and 21 rather easily, and very early into the season. Okay, with all of the glazing for Rayan 2 done, I am going to be putting Rayan in the S tier, or the overall best of archetype tier. I do think Rayan 2 is pretty much unmatched in the melee category. There's only one other character that I would say would be maybe above him, or probably above him, which is going to be a favorite for a lot of chatters of mine. She's a very commonly played character, but, I'm not going to spoil which one it is yet, because I think anyone watching this video is going to have 2 characters in mind, and it's going to be funny to see who's right and who's wrong. Speaking of having 2 characters in mind, next up we're going to have Erica 1. So Erica 1 is the multi-strike character now. Her whole like concept as a character is a mechanic called multi-strike. Now multi-strike is it's a bit confusing of a mechanic to like understand how it works, but essentially when you stand still and attack, your attack is gonna multi-strike. So it's gonna attack again and again and again up until like your multi-strike % chance. So if you have 350% chance, you're gonna attack once, and then it's gonna attack a second time, a third time, and a fourth time, and then you have a 50% chance for it to attack a 5th time. And every time it attacks, the damage from your multi-strike is also going to increment. And the damage increment is based off of your multi-strike increment count. So if you have like this additional multi-strike damage increment, that is what essentially is making it that your additional hits are doing that extra damage. And you can either get additional multi-strike damage, or you can just get like normal multi-strike damage. Both are like viable to get in the build at some point in time. Now it's very common for these Erica 1 archetypes to play Thunder Smite and go for like a deck stacking setup. As well as, otherwise just like very strong early game uniques. But I think this is the only character that you're really going to see doing deck stacking. I think deck stacking is rather weak as an archetype. And also, just as a side note, if you do use Farewell Desire, be sure to equip this in the offhand instead of your main hand. Yeah, I mean, the main reason for why you're equipping it offhand instead of your main hand is because you're going to use Joint Forces, and Feral Desire has a very low attack speed because it has a low roll of gear attack speed, and there's a low crit roll because of the attack crit rating roll. And on your main hand claw, you want to have like a high crit rating roll and a high gear attack speed roll. And if you use Joint Forces, both of these gear attack speed and gear crit rolls are like not important. Like they don't do anything. So it's very common that you're going to see Erica's using the offhand so that their main hand claw can have like the gear attack speed, gear crit rating. Honestly, really disgusting gear for day one. I didn't expect it to be this good. Especially considering like the damage. Damage is actually really low for this level of gear. But yeah, Erica 1 is actually a favorite of mine. I'm a big Catgirl enjoyer. And she was the first ever character I actually played in this game. And if you ever do want to play her, like Legolas is like an amazing content creator that just makes so many like guides for her. Now, unfortunately, I didn't actually play a melee attack skill at endgame this season, so I did have to find someone else's build to find a SS20 clear for Erica 1, playing Thunderspike. And as I mentioned before, this is very common for Erica players. They do dex stacking, which is like, I think the only melee attacker really that does do dex stacking, which is quite nice. I mean, dex stacking is nice for the movement speed, even though I personally like have a few gripes with it, especially like scaling defense and whatnot. But it is possible and people do it. And yeah, nothing too out of the ordinary, too exceptional. I guess the only thing really that's like special for Erica is that you're going to see people using the multi-strike mods on their slates, which especially if like not that many people was playing Erica 1. These monster slates can sometimes be fairly cheap, which is quite nice. That being said, though, I do think her popularity has like been going steadily up and up and up every single season. So I do think she's like starting to become more and more expensive as more people play her, just because of how good the guides written for her are. But I mean, you're still playing a melee attack bolt, so you still just get to 30 trillion with like no investment at all. But anyway, with all of that being said, where am I gonna rate Erica 1? Ooh. I think Erica 1's a very strong champion. I don't think she quite comes up to the level of Rosa 2 and Rayhan 2. I think both of these characters have their own merits and their own values. As just a general overall Euro, Rosa 2 is probably still a bit stronger. But these two are like really neck and neck. I think it's either anyone's game. Maybe if you're like a super experienced player on both, you know, you'll be like, oh, this one's better or this one's better. I don't have that many hours on both of these characters to definitely say that. I can just look at the performance and see that both of these like perform at a very, very similar level. Generally speaking, though, Rosa 2 does clear SS20 every season before Rayhan 2, like SS21 before Rayhan 2. But also, I think Rosa 2 has like 10 times the play rate of Rayhan 2. And with that being said, I'm going to be knocking Erica 1 down to just the extremely strong. She's a very, very powerful character. I do think that she doesn't quite perform on the level of Rosa 2 and Rayhan 2. Like if I look at the codes from like Erica 2 players and Erica 1 players, sorry, I keep saying 2, from Erica 1 players, it does feel often like they're just lacking a bit behind Erica 1. Oh, we need an extra row. But I do think she does lack a slight amount behind. I don't think it's a massive amount or anything. I think it's very overstated, like how badly she lacks behind. But I definitely do think that, like, at similar gear levels, that At least, in my opinion, like Rosa 2 and Ren 2 do seem to look a bit stronger. Then we're going to move on to Erica 3. So Erica 3 is an interesting one. Erica 3 pretty much sees no play at all from like Western players. She's, in my opinion, like a very, very cool character, but she has a lot of frustrations to her. The whole like theme around her hero trait is the Vendetta move, which is essentially Flicker Strike. So her whole thing is that she can Flicker Strike around to enemies, and whenever she Flicker Strikes, she's triggering her main skill and just doing damage to enemies, which is very cool. But the problem I run into of her playstyle is a lot of times, especially like in the early progression and whatnot, it kind of feels like you're just Flicker Striking into an enemy, getting blown up, and just being dead. And that just doesn't feel good. Like, you're just gonna be like, you're just gonna Flicker Strike into your death. There's just gonna be an enemy that has like some sort of like lightning circle around them that one-shots you. Or there's gonna be some sort of Emperor that one-shots you. Or just some random torchlight bullshit that's just gonna one-shot you, that other melee characters can, like, at max range, still kill and handle without any issues. Or very often, like, there might be, like, spikes on the ground or fire on the ground that you're gonna Flicker Strike into and just kill yourself with. Which, that feels really, really bad if you play Erica. But I do think there's ways to, like, work around it. Like, this is a day 1 setup, and in this day 1 setup, this person is just using Unmatched Valor with Centralize. And, like, if you have Unmatched Valor day 1 with Centralize, that essentially is giving you, like, I think it's like six, what was it? Consume half of current fervor, 65, blah, blah, blah. It's like 60% damage reduction or 56% like damage reduction. You know, once you have something like that in your build, it does start to like come together a lot better. But until you reach that point, it can be a bit frustrating. But even with all of that, like, even with the constant dying and whatnot, like, you're still going to be clearing your maps pretty fast. And I do think once you get her up and being tanky, she feels pretty good. But then another issue that I had when playing her is once you have, like, an absurd amount of gear, you get to a point where it's like you press Vendetta, you instantly clear the entire screen with Flicker, and then there's no more enemies on the screen, and you have to awkwardly run to, like, the next pack, so you can Vendetta on that pack and one-shot the entire pack. So those are issues and gripes that I personally have with the character, which I think is part of the reason why she doesn't see that much play. Because, realistically speaking, her hero trait is quite strong. It's just needing to fix her defenses and needing to prioritize defenses that much in the early league is rather a big, like, downside to the character that other characters don't really have. Like, other melee characters don't really have. They can instead prioritize more damage and be a bit more ZHP than Erica 3 is. But let me quickly go through this day 1 setup. Now, this guy had a very, very impressive day 1. I assume this code was taken rather late into the day, but I can assure you of the timestamp that it is still day 1. With the most notable thing, honestly, just being this Fallen Starlight. This was an absolutely crazy snipe to get from them on the first day. And with that being said, let me just show you the SS21 setup. Something that is nice about E3 is I think she works really well with the Frostbite, because if you go Frostbite early league, you can get freeze very early into the league. You know, you can get to 100 Frostbite rating and like have freezing. And I do think freezing like helps her a ton in feeling a lot safer, especially like in Tarmac 8 and whatnot, until you can get your defenses up to like push the profound. And obviously, if you do play Frostbite, you get to use Gale scaling, which is always very nice. Now, this is their mapping setup. They do. I don't remember if they had an SS20 code or like an SS21 code, but I do know that this person did kill SS21 and 3-star. So I can assure you that this build is very, very good. So, with all of that being said, though, what do I think about the characters like Strength and Power? Well, to be honest with you, I wouldn't feel good putting her in the same tier as Eric 1. I do think she's in a tier below, but I definitely don't think that she's like super off or anything. I don't think she's gonna get stuck in the earlier mid game where it's like, oh, I have no damage, whatever. I think you're gonna have damage at all points in time. I think your biggest issue is gonna be like defense, but I don't think fixing defense in this game is that difficult. I mean, as soon as you get like centralized Endless Fervor, which Endless Fervor is like really cheap to get these days because you can get it on a purple prism now. You know, as soon as you get that up and running, and as soon as you have like freeze up and running, you're just gonna feel fine. And once you have all of those, you know, you're just a decent character that does good damage. Next up is gonna be Rosa 1. Now, this character sucks dick. So Rosa 1 is actually really cool with her trait, because she's one of the few characters in this game that has like defense built into her trait. And one of the cool things she can do is she actually gets a block ratio upper limit from her trait. Now, back in the day, she used to be the only character who can like push her block limit above 60, but these days with Silent Avowal, like everyone can get to like 80 block ratio. That used to be a Rosa 2 exclusive, but even though she's not exclusive to that anymore, you know, that is like a niche inner trait that she used to have, or like still has, that she has a lot of tankiness and defense built into her trait in the form of block ratio. But, you know, this is still a game about doing damage. You still need to kill the enemies, you still need to like eventually reach the end game. And to give you an idea of like how bad this build actually is, or like how bad this character is, she is the only character on the tier list whose day 1 build isn't at least Time Rock 8. We have people whose day 1 builds, like the Rayan 2, that had over 200 billion damage. She couldn't get out of Time Rock 7 on day 1. That is really bad. And the big reason for that is when you play Rosa 1, you do play Demolisher skills, and it's kind of a meme, but it is true to a large extent. The way Rosa 1 kind of plays is you're kind of just stuck in Time Rock 7 until you get your Demolisher skill speed like sorted out. And then once you get to 500% Demolisher speed, you like just jump to Profound, and it's like super comfy Profound. So she definitely just gets very stuck in the early to mid game, but you know, once you do get your damage up and running, she's a very, very tanky character, and she's gonna feel decent enough. With that being said, this is the gear that this Rosa 1 character was using. I don't know if you want to really look at this gear, considering that, again, this is only Time Rock 7 gear. We were not able to reach Time Rock 8 day 1. And the reason why something like that matters so much is the faster you reach Time Rock 8, the faster you reach Profound, etc., being ahead of the curve also means that, like, the FE you do make from that extra drop quant is just substantially more impactful. Because the buying power of your FE goes down every single hour that you're, like, falling further and further behind other people. Now, if you just play this game as a single-player game and you don't really give a fuck about what other people are doing, and you're just playing your own game, that's gonna be fine. That's not really gonna matter. You can just play this character and have a good time. And I think that is the best way to play the game for most people. In fact, I do think that's the best way to play the game for everyone. But if you do have a semblance of care and you do want to be competitive, you want to be like one of the first people to do SS20 or to do SS21 or something like that, she definitely is going to be a character that you should just skip on. But this is the setup that she used to kill SS20. She just does a very classic for Demolisher skills going into the Demon's Touch Lone Walker setup. This is a very, very strong combo. I think any character can just equip these 2 items and just do 15 trillion damage very easily. And you play her with Ground Shaker. And they actually play double Ground Shaker. Yeah, I mean, not much to say about that. As well as War Cries. War Cries are a very interesting mechanic. I'll quickly talk about them. So, the way War Cries work is they have this line on them. Minus 2% additional damage taken by you for each enemy affected, stacking up to 8 times. So, if you use a War Cry and hits only one target, you're only affecting one enemy. So you only get minus 2% additional damage. But if there's 8 enemies around you, you're affecting 8 enemies, and you're taking minus 16% additional damage. But there are ways to scale this up. There's a mod in this game called Minimum Affected Enemies by Warcries, which surely this person would have. Oh, here it is. +4 to the minimum number of enemies affected by Warcry. But that essentially says is, even if your Warcry only hits no one, let's say your Warcry hits no one, it is still gonna, the game is still gonna treat it as if you hit at least 4 enemies. So at -2% additional, it's gonna become -8% additional, no matter who you actually hit with the Warcry. And if you then go into the Brave tree, you can actually pick up this legendary medium talent to add another +4. So with just this talent and having it as a slate mod, you're able to cap this out to +8. So every time you use a Warcry, you're getting the max effectiveness. But you can actually scale it from having a cap of 8 enemies affected to having a cap of 16 enemies affected. Which this person does here. And that's via the Formless main talent. So Formless says, ×2 max Warcry skill effects. Now that's a bit complicated or confusing for wording, but essentially what that is saying is that this line, instead of it being up to 8 times, is now up to 16 times. So you can then also use a inverse prism to copy this mod over here, and get an additional +6 to enemies affected. So every time this Rosa 1 uses her Warcries, the game just assumes at least 14 enemies are hit every single time. Now, if there is enemies above her, around her, she can reach the 16 number, but no matter what, she's always at least reaching the +14. And that's important to note, because if you scale Warcry effect, you can very easily reach the cap of -60% additional damage taken from Resurrection Warcry. And you can also have your Raging Warcry, which is giving you restoration speed and additional Demolish skill damage. You can have this Warcry, you know, have at 100% uptime, giving you something like 100% restoration speed for the Demolish charge skills. And giving you like 150% additional damage or whatever. So Warcries are very, very powerful for Demolisher skills, and it is a way that Rosa 1 players are scaling their character that might not be super obvious from like a observer standpoint if you don't understand how the Warcries work. So I felt it was rather important to go out of my way to actually talk about that. But other than that, everything here seems like pretty standard, nothing too special. Just a very generic Demolisher skill, Demolisher speed, Demolisher skill, build with Lone Walkers, Demon's Touch, all of the good stuff that we all know and love. But with all that being said, I did just bash on this character for like 10 minutes straight. She's really bad. She's really bad. Both her and Rayan 1 are just not in the best spots, unfortunately. They both just kind of suck. It's also like, Rosa 2 had a niche in the game. Her whole niche was like getting this insane amount of block ratio and being super tanky. And then they just added an item to the game that literally just does what she does. And if you turn that item into a Vorax item, it has no downside. And it's just like it's just like double damage on a Vorax item plus 20% block ratio upper limit, which is just stupid. It's so broken. And then lastly, we're gonna be going through Rosa 2. Before I go into Rosa 2, because I already put her on the tier list, I did put her as a, the rank 1. I do want to do an honorable mention for Gemma 3 and Gemma 1. Sorry, Gemma 1 and Gemma 3. Both of these characters can also play Demolisher skills. Both of these characters had absurdly low play rate, and the majority of people who played them just instead played either spellcasters or ranged attack builds. There might be other characters also that could be in this, I guess honorable mentions or underplayed mentions. But the reason neither of these two are getting played is because they both just kind of suck. And they're better off playing different builds instead. Cool. Let's quickly do Rosa 2 and finish this off. So Rosa 2 was also, it's a very impressive character. She has 100 billion day 1, which that is a bit behind the Rayhan 2 we looked at. But she very, very quickly like skyrockets to 2 trillion, 3 trillion by day 2, day 3. I think by day 3 she's like at 3 trillion or 2 trillion. just a very, very powerful character that can do quite a lot of forms early game and is very versatile. So she's another character we're going to be using this, or she's a character we're going to be using Spectral Slash. They don't use Spectral Slash on the main skill because they do use this 4% skill error if main skill is not used. So they do put the Spectral Slash in the second slot to make it bigger. Because a lot of these Rosa 2 formers are actually like big time outlaw formers, and they're like doing boss early lake. But other than that, it's just generic cold convert Spectral Slash. Spectral Slash is a very, very powerful skill, and cold, converting to cold is just probably the best like early game archetype. Cold is just super, super effective for damage, and it pretty much is free to do. It doesn't really require any investment. Bodhi's Girdle and Heart of Anita are both combo items. Especially Heart of Anita, getting this like early on is very, very important for your combo skills. This is a big power spec for combo skills. I did math on this like a few seasons ago. I don't actually remember what it was, but this necklace is a massive damage increase for combo skills. Especially because it gives not only combo finisher amplification, but it also gave combo finisher charges. Which I'm pretty sure this can roll +2, so getting a +1 is actually kind of unlucky, but I'm not 100% sure it might have been changed. Or it might be delusional. And we're just off a very, very good item early league. Very, very strong item. Injury buffer is really broken. Taking less additional damage is really broken. Just, oh, this is super good. Wow. He's not playing a Shadow Skill, but that is a nice pedigree if you were to play one. And then just going to the SS20 setup, which is like, for the average Rosa 2 player, this is like 3 days into the league, 4 days into the league, These Rosa players are they're just fucking gaming, what can I say? But this is the setup we do. Very, very common, so this is actually not a thing you really see in other regions, but in EU, pretty much every Rosa 2 just does the same setup. They all just go Trinity Ghost Slaughters, Broken Sun Ring. I'm actually very surprised that other regions don't do this build because it's so absurdly powerful. Maybe they don't know about it. Maybe no one there's like tried it. I really don't understand the reasoning behind it. But this is just such an absurdly powerful build. And especially going like further stacking with your Trinity makes it that you have so much defense built in from having unmatched valor and having centralize. This is the same defense layer we were talking about on the Aircraft 3. You do eventually go that on Rosa 2 as well, but you don't need to go it as early into the league. You can go it when it's like more convenient to go for tankiness, rather than being forced into it very early on when you would rather go damage. And because we are playing a Trinity build, we are doing the ultimate add LE damage to gear mod, which in terms of ultimate mods, this is one of the strongest ultimate mods in the game. This has so much value to it, it is absolutely absurd. I think any build that can utilize this mod is just immediately super powerful. It just has the downside of it is an ultimate prices mod. And sometimes for builds it can feel a bit awkward prior to that ultimate mod. Prior to the ultimate mod.
Milky__ rated my stream with 254 views.
Oh my god, he rated me during a video. Yo, thanks for raid, Milky. But yeah, it can sometimes be awkward before you have your prices gear to, getting to the point where you have your prices weapon with the ultimate mod on it. Rosa 2 on the other hand, she does not have any fucking struggle with that at all. Her progression is super fucking easy and chill. And before anyone mentions Apathy Blade, no, this is not an Apathy Blade build. Literally none of the EU Rosa 2s did Apathy Blade because they all killed SS20 before that item even existed in the league. Now, I do want to mention something about this. This is using Focus Slash. You only use Focus Slash for single target. You only use Focus Slash for bossing. If you look at any mapping setup, they're all using Berserking Blade instead of Focus Slash. Focus Slash is just literally 1-to-1 with Berserking Blade, and it just does double the damage for Berserking Blade. So whenever you're ready to go kill the SS20 boss or 21 boss, you just equip Focus Slash, you equip your 2 supports, you kill the boss, and you equip Berserking Blade, and you go back to just blasting maps. But other than that, I think everything about this character is very standard. I didn't talk about her year trait. Her year trait is she does a fuck ton of damage. Her year trait is actually very cool of a trait. It's like this round of Mercury where the enemies in it, it's like when you do single target damage, all the enemies in the circle take damage, and it's very cool and stuff. It doesn't fucking matter. It's Rosa 2. She just one-shots everything. Just does one Berserking Blade and the entire map is dead. But anyway, that is gonna be my melee attacker tier list. I hope this video was informative. Let me know actually in the comments like what you think about this format and doing this type of tier list instead of the usual just like generic, oh, this character, that character, that character, and spending a bit more time going in depth about like the builds and stuff. But as some closing thoughts, I do want to talk about just the melee attacker archetype as a whole and how I think it's going to perform in the league. If you want to have a very, very cheap like SS20 kill, this is my go-to recommendation. I think this is going to be exceptionally cheap because I am extremely confident that the most played hero next season is going to be Selena 2. And the gap between Selena 2 and any other character in the game is going to be ginormous. And Selena 2 is a spellcaster that can do both hit-based and dot-based. So any attack-based build is just immediately going to be significantly cheaper because they're not competing with the spellcaster Selena. So all your like plus first attack levels plus attack levels are going to be cheaper. Your swords are going to be cheaper. Your bows are going to be cheaper because the Selenas are going to be going wands and scepters and staves and cudgels, I think, or whatever the hell the dot one is. But on top of that, melee attack builds have always just been like one of the best archetypes for bossing and for like pushing SS20 as soon as possible. So that on top of a spellcaster league it's just gonna be a very, very easy and good time. I don't think you're gonna have like any competition on your slates. Your price is gonna be super cheap. Your hero memories are gonna be super cheap. You might have some issue with projectile speed hero memories and crit hero memories because hero memories do have a lot of overlap. You know, if you want crit and crit damage in hero memory, listen, buddy, everyone wants crit and crit damage in hero memory. You know, there's a lot of overlap there, and but I don't actually. I said projectile speed, but I don't think Selena's ever gonna want projectile speed because none of her like skills would make sense of projectile speed because Terra's skills don't really scale with Gale. I don't think any of them have the projectile tag. You know, you're gonna have cheap weapon sequences, cheap pedigrees. Your parameters are gonna be cheap because you're not in Gods of Knowledge or Deception. Cheap prisms, cheap corrodes and legendaries, cheap canvas supports. Pretty much everything that you could possibly like worry about your build having to compete with a Selena just is going to be non-existent. There's no overlap between the two character archetypes. But yeah, that was my tier list for the melee attackers of the Torchlight. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all again next time. Bye bye, YouTube. Bye bye.